Okay, I have a question for you. What's the point of making discs this light? What's the point of making a 112 gram Innova Aviar, or a 110 gram Gateway Saber, or a 117 gram Discraft Buzz? These are the kind of questions that I've gotten from people when showing them ultralight discs. And it's a difficult question that we're going to try to answer today. And I think it's a question that people are at least somewhat curious about, because one of the most viewed videos on our channel is a Flight Numbers Don't Matter video we did comparing lightweight discs to max weight discs with different throwers. But today we're going to take a slightly different approach, because we have 6 different molds at super low and super high weights, as well as a couple in between. And we're going to test those with 4 throwers of varying skill levels to see if we can actually find a use for these ultralight discs. Hey everyone, it's Greg from 6-Sided Discs. This is Flight Numbers Don't Matter, and today we are testing 6 of the lightest discs we have ever thrown. And no, before you ask, we are not testing any dyno discs today. In fact, we are throwing discs from 3 of the oldest brands in the game: Innova, Discraft, and Gateway. And for some icing on the cake, stick around to the bloopers at the end of the video where we're going to try out a 109 gram 6-sided disc. But what exactly is an ultralight disc, you might be asking? Well, allow me to circle back to dyno discs as an example, because we tested dyno discs at different skill levels almost exactly 2 years ago in November of 2023. Dyno discs are ultralight discs designed for kids. They aren't PDJ approved, though they are made from PDJ approved molds from ABC Discs. Dyno discs tend to weigh around the 120 gram mark. They also tend to be incredibly understable. For example, here's Caleb throwing a distance driver a while back, and it's so understable, it does a barrel roll. And as I said before, dyno discs are ideal for kids. According to their own marketing, they are best for kids that have a maximum distance of around 200 feet. But dyno discs aren't the only ultralight discs in the game anymore, because recently, Discraft began releasing popular molds in a new ultralight Jawbreaker light blend. The Challenger, Scorch, and Buzz are among 3 that we've gotten our hands on recently, and right out of the gate, they feel quite different. Obviously, they're super lightweight, weighing between 110 and 120 grams. But the plastic is also very tacky and grippy, a characteristic that we will definitely be talking about more later. They feel great though, and I can certainly understand the appeal. You play disc golf, you throw Discraft, you want to get your kids into it, so you hand them a Buzz. Makes perfect sense. But again, who are these ultralight discs really for? Everyone's saying kids, but I want to try some out for myself. In fact, to really try and figure out what these ultralight discs are all about, we're going to test them with 4 different throwers. From myself, a 38-year-old MA2, MA3 player, to my wife, a very casual player, my son Eli, who's 10 and only recently started playing more regularly, and we'll even be testing these ultralight discs with probably the exact target audience, the highest rated FJ6 player in the world, who is also the youngest ever winner at an A tier, Sophie. Sophie took down the FJ6 division at the Music City Open in April of 2025 at just 5 years old. And to put this into perspective, just to be able to play a full 18 holes 3 days in a row is already an accomplishment in my opinion, given the attention span that kids have these days. Lucky for us, Sophie has already tested some of these ultralight discs that we're going to be throwing today on her family's YouTube channel, Daddy Daughter Disc Golf. So a huge shout out to Sophie, her dad Tim, and the rest of the family for helping us out with this video. Make sure you check out their channel at the link in the video description. But before we find out how these ultralight discs work for the highest rated FJ6 player in the world, let's test them out ourselves. And we do have some specific criteria by which we're going to judge these ultralight discs today. First, I want to know how easy are these ultralight discs to throw? How far do they fly compared to heavier discs? How different is their stability to those heavier discs? And finally, how are they affected by the wind? And we'll begin with the Discraft Scorch. We have 3 Scorches to compare today: a 115 gram Jawbreaker Light Scorch that again has that sticky, tacky feel to the plastic. We'll be comparing that to what most players would consider a traditionally lightweight disc, a 159 gram Z-Light Scorch. And finally, we have a nearly max weight, 172 gram Fused Scorch. And for me, the difference between these discs was, unsurprisingly, obvious to see. For my arm, the Fused Scorch is pretty overstable on both backhand and on forehand. While the Z-Light Scorch did actually show some turn and fade. The Jawbreaker Light Scorch, however, was outrageously understable. It got a huge turn on my backhand, and then flipped over so fast it went straight into a roller less than 100 feet off the tee on forehand. So for me at least, the Z-Light Scorch flew by far the farthest. Emily saw similar overstability from the Fused Scorch, but she actually got a little bit of turn from the Z-Light. And once again, saw a huge turn from the Jawbreaker Light. Though, to be fair, she did rip it over on a bit of anhyzer. And that also means that her best distance was with the 159 gram Z-Light Scorch. For Eli's arm speed, though, we start to see a shift towards the ultralight having just that right combination of stability and distance. The Fused Scorch and Z-Light Scorch are both pretty overstable for him, quickly fading out. And while the Jawbreaker Light doesn't turn, it does push quite a bit farther forward and at least 70 feet beyond these two heavier Scorches. And if we ended the test here, we might conclude that, wow, ultralight discs are incredible and they fly so much farther. But no, we want a bigger sample size. We have 5 more molds to test, and I think we might be able to draw some other conclusions by the time we're done. So let's move down in speed to the Discraft Buzz. And we also have 3 buzzes to compare today. A 117 gram Jawbreaker Light Buzz, which is looking pretty nice in this purple if I do say so myself. We also have another traditionally lightweight buzz in Z-Light, weighing in at 160 grams. And finally, a 174 gram ESP Buzz. And for me, the ESP Buzz was surprisingly overstable. It is gently fading for almost its entire flight. The Z-Light Buzz also had some decent stability. It flips up to flat briefly, and then gets a similar gentle fade. And notably, those 2 buzzes had almost the exact same distance, about 5 feet between them. And incredibly, the Jawbreaker Light Buzz was more of the same. On a bit of a hyzer flip, it also resisted turning over. It pushes forward and fades to nearly the exact same distance as the 2 heavier buzzes. But there's a little more to the story, because this also happened on another throw with the Jawbreaker Light. More on that in just a second, because Emily also found the ESP Buzz to be pretty overstable. On a much lower line, the Z-Light did turn just a little bit, but this time the ultralight was indeed much more understable. On a similar line to the Z-Light, it turned quite a bit more. And you remember that janky shot I had with the Jawbreaker Buzz just a moment ago? Well, Emily found out just how hard it is to get a tacky, sticky, super lightweight disc to release from your hand. I almost hurt myself laughing. Oh my gosh.
It just went that way.
Mommy almost hit the car. And this will definitely become a trend amongst the ultralight discs, so stay tuned for more crazy misreleases. Anyway, for Eli, the Buzz was not nearly as conclusive as the Scorch. The ESP Buzz was still pretty overstable, and the Z-Light Buzz was as well. And the Jawbreaker Light initially looks to be flying much farther, but somehow only ends up about 10 feet away from the ESP Buzz. So if the ultralight Scorch was a convincingly farther flyer, the Buzz was hardly convincing at all. So let's check out our final Discraft disc, the Challenger. Our 2 Challengers are both on the lighter side here. A 165 gram Jawbreaker Challenger and a 119 gram Jawbreaker Light Challenger. And this is where things start to get silly. Because while I threw one of my best shots in a while with the 165 gram Challenger, a dead straight shot with a very minimal fade, I could not get a clean release with the Jawbreaker Light Challenger. Here's shank number 1. And a bit of grip lock number 2. And lastly, I thought if I slowed it way down, maybe I would get a decent release. Nope, not happening. Emily had a similar experience, with the heavier Challenger getting a nice smooth flight, but the ultralight doing the exact opposite. But as we saw with the Scorch and the Buzz, Eli didn't really have the same trouble that we had, as he got a pretty clean release and flight from both Challengers. And that means so far the ultralight discs are really performing and excelling for their target audience, which is ironic because Eli just recently took all of his old dyno discs out of his bag. Anyways, we arrive now at the 3 discs that Sophie did get to throw, and we'll see how the 4 of us handle the light and heavy versions of the Gateway Saber, the Innova Rock, and the Innova AVR in just a sec. But first, a quick reminder that if you enjoy the content we create, you can support us as a channel member by making your next disc or apparel purchase from our website at sixsidediscs.com, or by tuning into one of our Whatnot live streams where we're chatting with fans and selling lightly used discs from our videos. Oh, and I should also mention we're having a Black Friday sale the whole week of Thanksgiving, so check our website for that. Now, back to the ultralights. Now, we're all going to be throwing the same 109 gram Innova AVR, 110 gram Gateway Saber, and 112 gram Innova Rock. And while myself, Emily, and Eli will be throwing the same max weight versions, Sophie had her own heavy versions to test. Let's dive into our final 3 discs, and to mix things up, we're going to go player by player rather than disc by disc. And we'll begin with yours truly. And I gotta say, it was quite a mixed bag for me personally, because all 3 of these heavier versions flew great. Here's the Saber getting a slightly overstable flight, the DX Rock getting a nice smooth drift out to over 300 feet, and the Champion AVR showing its overstability. But the light versions for me were a nightmare. I could not get a clean release with the Saber. Here it is shooting high up into the air, doing something. The Light Rock was more of the same. On one throw, I just cranked it over a bit of a grip lock, while on the next, I thought I would try to do like a little hyzer flip. But this slight right to left tailwind that we had just carried this 112 gram rock about 100 feet to the left. And the Light AVR was just as hard to throw as the Light Challenger. So I'll graciously retire from this test and stick with throwing anything over like 158 grams. Let's see if Emily had better luck than I did. The Saber has a very clear and obvious difference for her. The 170 gram Diamond Saber was moderately overstable, while the Ultralight was super understable. The Ultralight Saber did go about 10 feet farther forward, but also about 100 feet to the right. The 180 gram DX Rock was also a bit overstable, while the 112 gram Rock was very understable. But again, very similar distances. And according to Emily, the lightweight AVR was useless. So while there's a nice variety in stability here, the lack of increased distance and control really calls into question how useful these ultralight discs would be for Emily. But Eli seemed to have some luck with the Discraft ultralights, so let's see how he fares with our remaining 3 discs. And Eli began by taking a crack at the Saber on forehand, and while the heavier Diamond Saber was mildly overstable, the Ultralight Saber was more like my earlier forehand with the Scorch, just screaming straight into the ground as it turned over. On backhand, he had a very similar experience. The 170 gram Saber shows its stability once more with a smooth hyzering finish, while the Ultralight rolls right over. And it was a similar experience with the Rock and the AVR. The heavier disc was very overstable, and the Ultralight was really understable. And this once again leads me to believe that the ideal weight for a disc, at least for Eli's arm speed, is probably somewhere in between these two. But what about for the #1 FJ6 player in the world? This is Sophie, and Sophie has some scary good form for a 6-year-old. If I were an FPO player, I'd already be worried. Let's begin though with the Saber. Sophie rips her heavier Saber out to around 107 feet. And while the light Saber gets a touch more glide and maybe a touch more turn, it only goes 10 feet farther. And if today is about trends, here's another one. Sophie's max weight rock flew out to 92 feet, while the ultralight rock flew out to 98 feet despite the slight grip lock. And even though her lightweight AVR went almost straight up in the air, it still flew 2 feet farther than the heavy AVR at 81 and 79 feet, respectively. So earlier I mentioned some criteria that we would try and judge these ultralight discs on. So let's review those once more. The first, how easy these ultralights are to throw? Well, they aren't. Consistently inconsistent releases is pretty much all I can say. How far do they fly compared to heavier discs? At best, maybe 5 to 10% farther. But if you factor in the wind, vastly different stability, I think it's very difficult to rely on that extra distance. The third question, how different is their stability? Well, as I just mentioned, almost always very much more understable, which makes sense. There just isn't as much weight in the rim to create gyroscopic stability. And finally, how are they affected by the wind? Well, fortunately, we didn't have much of a headwind today, but the tailwind carrying the lightweight rock a full 100 feet left is a strong indicator that they will be heavily impacted by almost any wind. And our results once again lead me to ask a question I asked earlier. Who exactly are these ultralight discs for? Yes, 6-year-old Sophie is seeing a little bit more distance. And 10-year-old Eli is seeing some variety in stability, and maybe a tad more distance with the drivers. But at what cost? Because while Emily and I's difficulties were well documented, even Sophie had trouble getting clean releases with these discs. Here's a few of her attempts that we didn't see. And it's pretty clear the lightweight discs are extremely inconsistent. In Dyno Discs marketing, they say their ultralight discs are for players who throw less than 200 feet, but I'm personally feeling like that number is way off. I think based on our results, ultralights are probably only useful for very low arm speed players, and ideally players who have never thrown heavier discs. You see, a heavy disc is heavy enough to pull itself out of your hand as you throw it. But these lightweight discs, especially these like really sticky, tacky Discraft ones, are just impossible to get out of your hand cleanly. And that leads to many more shanks than clean releases. Have you thrown ultralight discs? How have they flown for you? Let us know in the comments below. Huge thanks to Sophie and her family for helping us out with today's video. Make sure you check out their channel, Daddy Daughter Disc Golf, to see if she can add to her 23 career PDGA wins. Also comment below what other tests and comparisons you'd like to see on Flight Numbers Don't Matter in the future. For Six-Sided Discs, I'm Greg, reminding you that sometimes weight matters more than flight numbers. We'll see you in the next one. Time for this. Going forehand.
With a roll.
That made the worst little like doink doink selection. Nope, he threw it perfectly. It's gonna go in the basket. It's parked.
Or
we do have a headwind. Yeah, and honestly, shattering on a tree would be pretty epic.
Yeah, so really mush on this.
Oh! Oh! Let's see it. Oh, higher.
Oh.
You hit it right on the
Oh
corner.
my goodness. And that, folks, is why you don't make discs out of PLA. So, huge shout out to whoa, what? Whoa! Whoa!
Don't pick it up. It's okay.
But Eli seemed to have some luck with the Discraft. So while there's a nice variety in
Good job. That's okay. There you go.
Too light.
You guys will play through. Good throw.
If you like this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or becoming a member. Your support makes this content possible.